Welcome to Performance That Matters. I'm your host, Jordan Sullivan, and today I'm joined by fellow TFD performance dietitian and endurance nutrition extraordinaire, Lauren Nash. In today's episode, Loz and I are breaking down my work with Nedd Brockmann when he attempted the insane 1,000-mile world record. We discuss Nedd's day-to-day nutrition strategy, what numbers we were aiming for when he was training for the event, the types of foods we were prioritizing during training, our training nutrition strategy, and we break down his nutrition and hydration during the event itself, including how many calories a day he was consuming, how many carbs, what sups he was taking, and what the event was like as a whole. This has a lot of really good learning points, not only for athletes, but nutrition coaches as well. Let's get to it.
Welcome back to another episode of Performance That Matters. I've got the big mic today. I am the host, and with me today is my co-host, Jordy Sullivan. Welcome to being a guest. How does it feel?
It feels very similar to being a host, if I'm being completely honest.
Well, that's good.
Almost better, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, I guess I have to do, the heavy lifting now. But I mean, what you're actually going to be talking about is awesome. So I guess we'll get into it pretty much straight away. We're going to be talking a little bit more about fueling Nedd Brockmann's record run that he did. Was that last year now? Or
Last October,
Last
Big
October,
Neddy went for the 1,000-mile world record, which was, the goal was to run 1,000 miles in 12 days, which if you're a runner, or even if you're in any type of endurance athlete, is a crazy, crazy feat. And we worked together for about 6-7 months getting him ready for that. And then I was on site with him down at Sydney Olympic Park doing his on-site nutrition, and it was a wild experience.
And I guess, we kind of knew Nedd being a little bit cowboy in that first run across Australia, steak pies, sausage rolls, all the things that you can really get when you're running across the Nullarbor. How did his nutrition differ? Right, for this prep, he obviously took it seriously if he got some professional help. What were some of those big changes from that first run and what you guys really worked on together in the lead up to this huge record run?
That's a good point because I think, he was pretty cowboy. And I think the point I make to everyone is like, well, there's not a kitchen with fresh Greek salads in the middle of the Nullarbor, so you're kind of making do with what you got. But Nedd, for one, is a phenomenal athlete. I don't care what anyone says. Nedd is such a great athlete. And you got to remember, he's been doing these types of runs for a very long time. It's not just the run across Australia. He did the 50 marathons in 50 days, and he's been doing it for a very, very long time. And he is a very talented runner. I'll give him that. His VO2 is great. His running technique, I remember on the 9th or 10th day sitting there with Belly, his physio, and just looking at him going, this guy's punched out 800 miles or whatever it was, and his running technique's still flawless. So you got to give Nedd credit in the fact that he is a phenomenal athlete. With saying that, and the reason I say it is that training does most of the heavy lifting. But when you come to an event like this, you've got to fuel it. If the gas tank gets empty, the car just stops. So when we started with Nedd, it was just looking, okay, well, what are you doing? And I saw this a lot with the fighters years ago. When you're in the public eye, that definitely plays on you, right? I know with a lot of the fighters that we work with, the UFC fighters don't like doing photo shoots outside of fight week. Fight week, they're emaciated. Let's be real. They're emaciated, but they're super jacked. That's the photo that gets out on the internet. And then they don't want people to see their normal everyday, but they're still in great shape. Don't get me wrong, but they're not that. And I think with Nedd, there was definitely a little bit of that. Anyone in the public eye, even, let's be real, Loz, even us, when you've got the spotlight on you for certain things, you feel a pressure to look a certain way. That was probably the first hurdle. And I think as a consequence to that, there was a lot of those ideologies of, I don't want to overly fuel my body. I don't want to push it too far because I don't want to. And it's like, Neddy, man, we got to get over that. We've got to start putting fuel. Like you are, even if you don't want to admit it, you're an elite athlete. And what you're doing is crazy. We need to fuel like that. And that was just making sure every day you're getting in this many calories. Of those calories, you're getting this many carbs, this much protein, this much fat. Give your body the fuel to do the work. I think that was the big thing when we started, and it was just putting those processes in place.
Yeah, and that's interesting as well, because I guess for us as the people watching and cheering, we don't see what the training looks like or what his training load looks like. We know what the big event is, but I guess what did it take to fuel, a day of preparation for this type of event in terms of his nutrition? Like you said, you're going pretty much top to bottom. I know we can probably talk about, the fueling of the day itself, but just even maybe as a ballpark figure, like what did he need to aim for every day in training just to make sure that he wasn't, going against that, I guess, that body weight pressure, but also making sure he was fueling himself enough?
Yeah, and I've got his numbers here. I'll read out roughly what he was eating. But you got to remember for this event, again, 1,000 miles over 12 days. He was sleeping, don't get me wrong, but he's running for 16 hours straight. So a lot of his training was do a big training session in the morning, go back home, eat, nap, go back out in the afternoon, eat, nap, and then go back out at some stupid time at nighttime. And that was his training for a lot of it. And then on a Saturday, he'd go out for this huge run. I remember he called me one day and he was like, hey, I need some advice about the hydration. It's really hot today. I'm like 50 clicks deep. And I'm like, dude, it's like 8 a.m. Like, it's just crazy sessions like that. So he had a huge training block. That's why. So I gave him these numbers. I said, Ned, at a minimum, you need to be hitting 4,000 calories a day. Absolute minimum of that, about 530 grams of carbs, 200 grams of protein, and about 120 grams of fat. And Ned walks around about 80 kilos. So it might sound like a lot, but when you see what type of training he's doing, that's probably, I wouldn't say on the lower end, but it's like we probably could push a lot more. Yep. But again, steps, right? Like Ned had never worked with a dietitian before. He intuitively had got most of it right. I was just coming in and polishing it up. That was a big one though. For me, I said to him, like, we've got to make sure we're getting at least that in, because everyone who listens to the podcast will know that energy availability, big thing. You don't want to come in with injuries. You're going to come in somewhat injured when you're doing crazy volume like that. That was it. 4,000 calories, 530 grams of carbs, protein 200 grams, fat 120 grams.
Yeah, okay. I feel like that's interesting to know because, I mean, we'll get into it, but that would have been a big jump up from then fueling, pretty much running for, 16 hours a day. So in terms of that, right, I imagine during your training, you would have been working on maybe what types of foods, drinks, I guess goals to go per hour in training. I know I made jokes about the sausage rolls and everything, but as dietitians, we know that kind of processed high calorie food is actually what you need when you're fueling these big events. So, I'm not here saying, oh, he shouldn't be eating those types of foods. But in terms of his intra-run side of things, what types of foods was he having, whether it was in training or also then again moving forward to the race?
Yeah, we had a plan where we broke it up into different segments because the way the race worked is that Ned would have to do, I think it was 8 laps. So you do 8 laps and you move out, and then you 8 laps and you move back in. Okay. And so we broke it up into 16 lap blocks, and that's kind of how we structured his nutrition. So he'd do, say, 8 laps, and then I'd go give him some nutrition. He'd come back the 8 laps, we'd give him something else, and then I'm pretty sure he was doing a master lap was 4 of those blocks. Okay. So 4 16 lots. And when he'd come in after that, that's when we would have a set meal. So we tried to replicate that as best as you can in training, and what that translates to, because he's not running around Sydney Olympic Park in training. He's running around Bondi and whatnot. You're just trying, okay, Ned, when you come back in, eat this, take this out with you. Just get your gut used to constantly putting food in. Because through those 16 hours in that day, there's going to be hours where you're not going to feel great and it's going to be down here. There's going to be times where you feel great and we're going to get more in. But the consistent thing for 16 hours each day is you're going to be eating food. So you've got to get used to moving your body and eating food. So that's what we were practicing. And again, different options. It was literally anything and everything you could think of. We were doing, sausage rolls, burgers. We were doing burrito bowls. We were doing pastries. We were doing all sorts of stuff. Lots of custard. That was kind of like an inward joke.
Yeah, custard.
And chocolate milk. Like, I'll give it to him. Ned drank a lot of Ned's milk when it was out there, but it was a great source. Got good natural carbohydrates, great protein, and good electrolytes. It was almost the perfect thing, but we had to practice it in training. Had lots of electrolytes, carb powders. We did experiment with like a lot of different gels. And I don't know if this is just because Ned's like a farm boy and he grew up eating real food. Didn't really sit well with him. And we decided, you know what, like let's not go with the gels. We had them there on the actual day. We had them there if we needed a Hail Mary, man, just get this in, we need something. For the most part, didn't really use it. And he was just eating mostly whole food. I'd say for 95% of it was all whole food, but that's what he trained on, but that's what he's always done. And again, I kind of bring that back to maybe just because he's a farm boy and he's just used to eating normal good food every single day.
Yeah, that's awesome. You make a point. I don't think I've ever seen a photo or a video with Ned holding a gel. And it's great that he was able to get to the point of stomaching whole foods. But some of those ideas that you were just throwing out, burrito bowls, burgers, that doesn't sound like just your average 80 grams of carbs per hour. That's quite complex. And obviously when you're running for 16 hours a day, you can't just be having carbohydrates every hour for 16 hours a day. So maybe even tell us a little bit more about what the before and after the running looked like as well, right? Because you're not just fueling those running hours, but, did he even have time to eat something in the morning when he woke up? I mean, sleep was there wasn't much sleep going around and he probably didn't feel very rested, but I also appreciate it was probably like, hey, let's get an extra 10 minutes of sleep instead of waking up and having 10 minutes for my breakfast to digest. So yeah, what did the nutrition look like around the running hours?
He did have breakfast every day. He had oats.
Nice.
We had, set breakfast, oats, berries, bananas, throw some salt on there, peanut butter. It was pretty substantial. So Ned would get up and he'd have the oats. He's so good with it though. We called him like the iron gut. He would get it all in, but he knew. He even said that, I know I've just got to get this in. I'm not thinking about it too much. I know I need to get this fuel in. So he'd get up, have the oats, and then he'd go out into the arena and start going on the track. I would rock up 5:36 each morning. My hotel was a little bit away. I'd come up and you'd just hear him. And you'd hear him just banging his feet going for the first 45 minutes. And that was tough. Not tough to watch. I've seen lots of crazy stuff and I definitely have niched myself in the more extreme sports. I've seen some wild stuff. After the race, I said, why were you doing that? Why were you slamming your feet? And he goes, man, my feet were so sore that after I had breakfast every morning, I'd go out and get started and I had to slam my feet for 45 minutes so they'd go numb and I could no longer feel them and then I could run.
Oh my gosh, that seems very unhealthy.
Yeah, crazy.
But it's what it takes, I guess.
But the thing is, and this is the wild thing, every morning he'd get up, have his oats. So beforehand, and then we'd kick into the nutrition plan and we started the nutrition plan every day. I'd go to McDonald's, I'd get sausage and egg McMuffin, I'd get 2 pancakes and heaps of maple syrup. And what we would do would just put heaps of ketchup, heaps of tomato sauce in the sausage egg McMuffin. And then we'd get the pancakes, drench them in maple syrup. And he'd do his 8 laps and that's what he would eat. And again, if people would look at that and go, man, you're giving him McDonald's. It's like, man, the guy's running 16 hours every day. And when you look at that and you just break it down, like, don't get me wrong. Like, I know people say there's no good food, no bad food. I will draw the line, say McDonald's. I will put that, in the very not good foods. But that worked for him because it gave him really simple digesting carbs. The other thing that people don't think about, had loads of sodium, which for the everyday person is not great. But for him, sweating 16 hours a day, doesn't particularly love taking salt tabs or anything like that. We had electrolytes that we have. But even then, the sheer volume you have to put in, that was really easy for us to get through with foods like that. So that was that. And then when he finished each day, he'd come in, he'd literally, and I'm not making this up, and maybe he did it for marketing, I don't know. As soon as he finished off at the end of the day, you'd give him a Nedd's milk. And I love that. I love that he went for the Nedd's milk because, again, you're getting good, simple carbohydrates, you're getting the protein, you're getting the electrolytes in, and you're replacing fluid, which is quite tough at that point of the day. 1 Nedd's milk, he'd come in, jump in the wheelchair, we'd wheel him out, he'd have a big steak, fries, and then he would have another Nedd's milk. And that was pretty good macros. And again, he ate it every night. And you could tell he didn't want to. He absolutely did not want to, but he just put it in. And then, again, the sleep was a big, major thing. And that's something I've learned over my course working with these extreme ultra endurance. Like, I'm talking hundreds of miles, thousands of miles of it. The sleep is really tough. And yeah, we used a lot of the Pillar performance products and they were good. I know they're massive in the triathlon and
I love their magnesium.
Yeah, and the magnesium. And it was great. Like, it was so good for Nedd and that. And it made a big difference. Like, I'll stand on the horse and I'll say, yeah, that makes a big difference in that. When it really matters for him to get, I wouldn't say a good night's sleep, but to at least get his head on the pillow, that did make a big difference. But that's what he was doing. So he did have a structured breakfast and he had a structured dinner.
Yeah, I love that. And then let's get to the exciting part of it as well. I guess during those 16 hours, you gave us a bit of an insight into how you were breaking down the laps, which I think is not only great from the fueling perspective, but also probably for Nedd, it gives you something to look forward to in a sense where you know this is coming up and it helps to break down the day. But yeah, maybe run us through some of the numbers, whether it was, what you were aiming for every hour or every master lap. But yeah, I want to hear about how many calories, what were you aiming for, fluid, grams of carbs. Let's hear it all. What was Nedd getting through? I'm going to
read it off my phone because there's a lot of numbers here. But I did write it down. We worked it all. And we had a team. So Nedd's mum was great. She was so helpful. She was, to be fair, she did most of the heavy lifting with the nutrition. And I was just there kind of I'd say directing. She was doing most of it, to be honest. And he had a whole team there. So we were recording everything. And so I would be able to go through the numbers each day. I had my goal and then, okay, did we hit our goal? And even each hour, we would break it down. What did we get in this hour? So it was really good. I had live feedback and I got a lot of data. So essentially when you average it out, he was eating per day 8,061 calories per day, which was comprised of 1,090 grams of carbs, 307 grams of protein, and 296 grams of fat. When you break that down per kilogram, so for his body weight, he was 79 kilos. So carbs, 13 grams per kilo.
Yeah.
Protein, 3.8 grams per kilo, and fat, 3.7 grams per kilo.
Wow.
Which is pretty substantial. And then if you broke down the carbs per hour across the 16 hours of the day, he was getting about 68 grams per hour.
Awesome. Yeah.
Which is really cool. Fluid, Fluid was a really interesting one because the weather was kind of changing. It was October, so there could be really hot. There also could be really cold. And like one night it was super misty and foggy and just strange weather. So, but it ranged anywhere from, what do I have here, 500 up to 1.2 liters lost, dependent on the weather, depending on the intensity as well, depending on all the things that will change your sweat rate. But we also set up a scale because that was really important. Every time he came in on a master lap, I had to get a reading where he was. So I had an idea of what his clothes weighed dry, what his clothes weighed wet. And then so I could get him on the scale, and I set upper and lower boundaries. I didn't want him getting under 2% dehydrated. I know we can argue that number and go, is it 2% body mass loss? I don't want to even play with it. You could get to 5%. Nah, not for an event like this. We're not risking it. 2% is my limit. You can get there, but we need to get back up. But I also didn't want him overhydrating. So I didn't want him going above whatever our weight was when we woke up that morning, accounting for what we've had in that master lap. His lower end was about 75.4 kilos. And then his upper end, I didn't want to see any higher than 78.4. But the thing is with Nedd, he was so diligent because every lap he came round, either myself or one of the guys that were with him in the crew, we would be offering him either water, electrolytes, or a carb drink. And pretty much either every lap or every other lap, he was drinking it. And we were keeping tabs on how often he was going to the bathroom. And then with this weight, we were able to make a call and go, okay, are we adequately hydrated? And for the whole 12 days, he stayed within these limits. Never went over, never went under.
That's solid. And I mean, this might be a bit TMI or apologies to Nedd, but I mean, you know, like urine color and things like that. I mean, was that anything that you were monitoring? Because I know that's an easy thing I can sometimes help my athletes with in terms of those longer events as well, is like self-monitoring their hydration as well, just based on small things like that. I mean, was anyone in charge of that? Or, you know, did Nedd kind of report any kind of brown or red peas or, you know, what were you looking for to make sure as well, beyond his weight, that he was in that good range?
Yeah, 100%. We had 2 toilets set up in the at Sydney Olympic Park. So I was monitoring every time he went there. Again, you don't want to go too much because you'll be overhydrating. And you don't want to go too little because you're underhydrated. But then when you're going, you need to know what's going on. Because I'm okay with you not peeing so much, but I do need you to pee. Because if you're peeing, it's telling me your kidneys are good, everything's working, the fluid's going through. I'm okay even if you come out and say, hey, it's pretty yellow. I go, okay, for what we're doing, as long as those kidneys pushing that water through, I'm okay with it. And then if we're peeing constantly and it's super clear, people go, oh, that's great. You go, probably not. We can get in some pretty dangerous territory. So we were monitoring all of that. And to be fair, he was always on the pale to the good side. Every time I spoke to him about it, he's like, yeah, it's fine. And then we were also, the number 2's coming out, big thing as well. You're putting all this food in. A big thing with your hydration is if you get really dehydrated, you stop doing what we call perfusing your gut, which just means blood isn't going to your gut. If blood's not going to your gut, it's not oxygenating, which means you're not going to digest your food properly. That's when you can get cramps, you can get stitches. Him going to the bathroom, again, is just a sign, okay, your body's processing everything. In this crazy event that we're doing, we're probably getting it right. And again, it's pretty regular. His urine was good. And then when we're checking the weight, I'm going, oh, yeah, he is absolutely nailing this. But that's a credit to Nedd. Like, I'll give it to him. We did work on it, and don't worry, we had lots of conversations about his hydration and how he should be doing it. But, man, he like intuitively, and again, I think it comes back to this conversation we always have where guys are either really big sweaters or they're really not big sweaters. Whether or not that's because for genetics or whatever it causes that, Nedd's not a huge sweater and he's really good at staying on top of it. And he just intuitively, because he'd come past in some laps, be like, nah, I don't need fluid. And then you'd be like, oh, okay. And you'd watch him, and then even he'd get coming around, I go, I've got to tell him to get some. And before I even got out there, boom, he's grabbed it. Yeah, you can say whatever you want about Nedd, but man, he is a phenomenal athlete.
Takes it seriously, which is great, because I think it can be really easy to shrug off, you know, the importance of things like nutrition, hydration, physio, recovery, sleep, all of these types of things. But it's great that he dialed in all of these and obviously brought in experts for everything. I think it's also important to acknowledge, you know, were there any like hiccups or things that you had to kind of troubleshoot, damage control on the spot? I mean, with an event like that, I imagine your body's under a lot of stress, but for you being there, was there anything, were you putting out fires at all, or was there anything that you had to, you know, navigate that maybe never reared its head in training, or, were maybe going to be impactful for Nedd's race if you hadn't have gotten on top of it?
I mean, nutrition-wise, he did really well. I think there was one dish that was made by one of the hotels, and he had a little bit of stomach issues, and he did say, he's like, that's the only thing I've had that's made me feel crappy, and he had a bit of a throw-up. But other than that, he was pretty good on it. But then, I mean, that's from the nutrition side.
Yeah.
His,
and that's what we're talking about, yeah.
and his body, like Belly did most of the heavy lifting with his physio, but Belly also did manage the mental side of it. And I guess bringing this back to nutrition, running an ultra marathon is like this anyway.
Yep.
And your goal is to try and stay as level as possible. What goes up's got to go down. You don't want to be too high. You don't want to be too low. You kind of want to stay as best as you can. But for Nedd, like just sheerly getting up, going out, you're running around, and you've got the whole world watching you too. Like,
it's intimidating.
and it's live streamed on TikTok or whatever it was on. So it's a lot of pressure. So there's obviously a lot of this. What I did notice when we go through the nutrition numbers, as he was going out and back and I was going out and feeding him, say I went out there and you're trying to give him a bit of variety as well.
Yep.
Palate fatigue's playing into it. So you want to mix up sweet and all these different types of flavors. You don't want to overkill one thing or underdo another. If I took something out, he'd have it, but he was like, I could tell I didn't love it. So he's not having heaps of it. And say that happened 2 times in a row and the carbs would come down, you would see a direct result. You would get, start to go down here. And it was like, okay, the carbs are definitely one of the factors that's definitely helping this. But in saying that, in ultras, like, there's lots of things. Yeah, it was an absolute roller coaster. But yeah, in terms of mental strength, like Nedd Brockmann, he's up there like with the best in the world. I would say in the world, he's up there with Goggins, Cam Hanes. He should definitely be in that conversation with those guys.
Definitely. Yeah, I was lucky. I heard him actually present at a function over here in Perth, and it was the first time I'd ever, obviously heard him speak in public, and it was incredible. So humble and so talented. But kind of circling back to the calories as well, I know you mentioned you were, I think, around 8,000 per day. How did that actually meet his energy output? Were you trying to match it 1 for 1? Were you trying to be in a surplus? I mean, we always talk about, right, during these big races, it's highly unlikely that you're replacing every mil of fluid that's lost. You're replacing every single calorie that's burned. But was that a consideration? And, maybe how does that align with things that we read in the literature? Because you're there on the ground, real life case study. What calories, how did those calories, I guess, reflect his energy output? And, was that based off, anything as well?
Yeah. And this is interesting because this paper, I guess we're going to talk about, it's by a group called CREER. So CREER et al. 2025, anyone wants to read this, looked at 2 ultramarathon runners, doubly label watered them, which essentially, long story short, can help you tell how many calories did they burn in that period. And in that study, which is, there's not many of them, there's a few, there's that race, there's one that's done on Western States, and then another ultra race, generally find the same thing, that they're burning about 16,000 calories in a 24-hour period. Elite guys, obviously a bit more. If you're a bit more back of the pack, not going as hard, probably a bit less. But what you see pretty consistently across those papers is that the athletes are only replacing 50% of that calorie intake. And then when I ran Nedd's number before we did this, and I'm running through the numbers, I go, man, Nedd basically hits this as well, where he's getting the 8,000 calories in a day, which is a gargantuan effort. If anyone's ever tried to eat 8,000 calories while running, it's no easy feat.
Yeah.
But it probably, maybe not quite 50%, maybe a little bit more, but it was around that mark where he's only replacing 50%. The thing is, we can absolutely stay weight stable by manipulating his water and making sure he's hydrated. You could definitely see as the days went on, your body's got to get that from somewhere, right? And where's it going to pull it? It's going to pull it from your energy reserves, which is your fat stores, and then your muscle. And Nedd, you could definitely see in the legs. The legs were coming away. That's where his body was taking those extra calories from each day. But I don't look at that and go, okay, like, we should have fueled him more. It just doesn't happen in these ultra endurance events. And we see that with the elite guys. You're never really going to get these guys where you're fueling 1-to-1 with their needs. Unless, and I guess we'll talk about this in the future, it's a bit of a slower runner and they're not pushing so much intensity, and it's kind of rolling days on like a 5-day event where you're sleeping 45 minutes at a time. Maybe you'll get close because you're constantly eating. But yeah, we're pretty much replacing 50% of Nedd's intake, but that is consistent with what we see with all elite endurance runners.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because I just know I sometimes get, with new clients, how many calories should I eat over this Ironman? And so it's not always that simple as, we're trying to replace every single calorie that you're burning, because you'd be feeling pretty uncomfortable if you're eating 7,000 calories over the course of a 12-hour Ironman, which, I think for me, I checked, my Garmin watch reckons I burnt 6,800 calories or something over an Ironman. I know I didn't eat that much. But yeah, I just thought I'd ask because I know that a lot of clients, or it's sometimes something we see on our circle group is, how many calories should I eat during an ultra marathon? Because people, they feel like, or they expect that they need to replace everything that they're burnt, and it's just not possible. Because imagine how much more uncomfortable, or really just impossible it would be for Nedd to be consuming more than 8,000 calories when he's just constantly running?
Well, here's a theory I have, Loz, and we've spoken it about in our team meetings quite a lot. We always talk about carb loading going into these bigger events. I definitely think there's a place for calorie loading because, again, your body's got to get this energy from somewhere, probably going to come from your stores. And in that paper, they tracked these guys 7 days after, and you do see they recover it. And we've seen it in MMA literature when guys go through weight cuts, put themselves in a 100,000 calorie ditch, they'll recover it pretty fast. Your body intuitively will look for those calories. I think there's absolutely a place where, yes, you need a carb load to get the glycogen in those energy stores in your body. Probably a space where if you're doing a 12 to 24 hour event, where you can try to calorie match what you're going to burn in the event. So that's in your system leading up. You probably wouldn't want to do it for a week, but even just 2 days. And I've tried that with some of our athletes with a lot of success. And if you're doing a carb load, you're getting a decent amount of calories in anyway. That might just mean instead of 1 day, you do 2 days. But I think that's something we'll probably start seeing a lot more as ultra endurance gets more popular, as we see more of the science come out, as we see more papers like this.
I think that could also be a really favorable approach for, the athletes out there who, like many, actually feel uncomfortable with a carb load because you are retaining lots of extra water. Runners specifically are quite sensitive to their weight. They don't want to be on the starting line feeling heavy. And I sometimes say to my clients, you want a carb load to help, not hinder your performance. So, potentially calorie loading and increasing more of your fat intake, which is a lower volume, higher calorie way to get nutrition in before a race. I think could be a really good way for some people as well. Well, thanks for sharing a bit more of an insight with Nedd. I know you probably can't give anything away, but do you know if there's anything on the cards for him?
I think he does these events every 2 years, which makes sense, right? It's so crazy. He's got his uncomfortable challenge coming up. And we're September now, in October.
I have seen that floating around on socials.
Yeah, get around it.
Awesome.
There's a charity running's great. Like it's a great cause. I think Nedd, every charity run you do is for a great cause. I think Nedd really does do it the best though, and he really does advocate. I think he cops a bit of slack, but he really is passionate about it. That's the thing, is that he is really passionate about this cause, and you can see it, especially in those ultras. And we always talk about you've got to have a really strong why you're doing this, and you can see it in the back end of these things. That is a huge driving force for him. And yeah, Nedd's a special person. He's a great athlete, special athlete, but he's a special human. Like, you've heard him talk. Like, you just spend a bit of time with him, and the guy's 25 or something. It's crazy.
It's insane.
He's got a big future, but yeah, nah.
That's exciting. Well, thanks for sharing a little bit more of an insight. We're lucky to work with hundreds of amazing athletes, but especially, standout characters like Nedd. So yeah, I'm sure all the listeners would have taken a little piece of value out of that. So thank you so much. And thanks for being my guest, I suppose we could say, or co-host today. And look forward to the next one.
All right. Thanks for being the hostess with the mostest.
I'll chat to you next time. Thanks, Jordy.
All right, that is it for another episode of Performance That Matters. If you enjoy this content and want to show us some support, then please leave us a 5-star review and share this episode with a friend. And if you want to go on an even deeper dive on the science of performance and be surrounded by a like-minded community, then come join our high performance group. Head to our Instagram, which is _fight dietitian, and click on the link in our bio. You'll find our circle group where we post daily discussions with our community of athletes, coaches, and nutrition professionals. That's it for now. I'll see you guys for the next episode of Performance That Matters.